Today I sit down with a business leader who will teach us what it really means to forgive. Peter DeSoto was shot in the throat and left for dead in the jungles of El Salvador while doing his mission. Since then, he's returned, forgave the person who shot him, built a successful sales business here in the United States, and is part of some exciting projects taking place back in El Salvador related to Bitcoin. Enjoy this episode with Peter DeSoto in the business of forgiveness. My name is George Stroumboulis, and I'm extremely passionate about traveling the world, meeting new people, and learning about new businesses. Join me as I sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about their journeys. This episode of Invigorate Your Business starts now. We're going to start this.
Okay.
And there's a lot we're going to jump into today. And again, I do appreciate you coming to join us and sitting down. We go back several years.
Yeah.
Your story is remarkable. How we met and what we do is not as exciting, but the story is pretty spectacular. So Pete DeSoto met in the lighting space, right? So we're both in the lighting industry. From the sales, distribution, manufacturing side, and that's kind of where we built our relationship.
Yep.
And the more we got into it, you start learning about your background and everything, and then, the book and your story, and we're going to get into everything. So welcome onto the show.
Thanks, man. You heard my voice.
Yes.
Right, that was the first take, right?
That's the first take. So I guess the first thing, when I first met you, it was, what's wrong? Did this guy have a late night?
Yeah.
Was he screaming? What's going on? And it's that, and you hear that every day. So tell it, why do you talk like that? Like what's going on?
Well, yeah, I have a number of stories, just depending on how much time I have. So, it's either I was at a concert and I screamed too long,
yes.
or I screamed at my kids, and with COVID, it was a lot of fun because I had to say, hey, I don't have COVID.
Right.
And then
Everyone's paranoid.
But then, later, because it's been a while, it's been a number of years. So lately, I just drop it.
You just drop it.
People will be like, oh, what's wrong? I got shot in the neck. And the expressions that people have.
You got shot in the neck.
When you just deadpan drop,
yes,
I got shot in the neck. It's so out of context.
Yeah.
That usually puts people back. So the best is at Starbucks when they've joked about it, or actually had a pizza restaurant 2 months ago. The guy was giving me a hard time, didn't know the story. And so I finally turned because first time it was fine, but the third time.
Oh, you kept on.
He kept on joking about my voice and, was I screaming too much and I just turned and I just said, yeah, I got shot in the neck. He spent the next half an hour apologizing. We didn't pay for the pizza. So, it can actually turn out good to get free food and get some free coffee.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, you say you got shot in the neck, and that's a loaded statement. But I've been on a conference call when I first met you, and someone on the phone, right? It was several years ago, made a comment like that, and I already knew the story. And for me at the time, it's like, dude, don't be an asshole. Don't even comment if something seems off. But walk us through the story. We're going to get into work. We're going to get into, the business side of it. It is a business-related podcast. Yeah. But just walk us through. You got shot. What does that mean? How did it happen? Where were you?
Yeah, so when we met in lighting, I had worked for a lighting company, same one I work for now, for a few years.
Right.
But I'd always been interested in economic development work around the world. That's what I got into school for. So I had a friend who had done some really cool work down in El Salvador, and I went down 2003 to check out the work, the projects they were doing, and no real intentions, just to see it. They have great waves down there, so I got some surfing, and it was beautiful, beautiful country. But just the next couple of years, really was kind of haunted with a desire to be a part of it on a more full-time basis. So in 2005, my wife, and by that time we had 4 kids, moved down there.
Wow.
And joined this team. The name of the organization was called Enlace, and they worked in communities and churches, doing projects from water to housing, economic development. And one of the projects they did was a medical clinic. And actually the company that I was with gave us money to build it. So it was kind of this really cool thing where my past work was helping with the business that it was Regency Lighting, and so we built this medical clinic.
Okay.
And I was up there with our construction team and our video team to kind of check on it. And on the way back down the hill, we had two cars. We were coming down, and you had to cross two rivers. It was like Indiana Jones
Sure.
type location, way up in the hills. I came around a corner, and I hear this screech and the scream, and a guy jumps out on the left side, and his face mask on, and points the gun at my head and just starts shooting.
Not a warning. Just
Not a
starts.
warning, just starts shooting.
Jeez.
So the first bullet hit and pierced my throat, and the other bullets, by the grace of God, I slammed on the gas instead of the brake. Had I hit the brake, I'd be dead because I would have had multiple bullets in the head. But the shot around us luckily missed everybody else in the car. There was another shooter that was shooting as well. So, at first I knew I was hit. It felt like I just got, thumped. And
You knew right away when that bullet came.
well, I mean, it's so shocking, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're driving, and within split seconds, this has all happened. And you grab your throat, and it's burning. But you also, because it started bleeding, but it missed the jugular by a centimeter, just the way I was turned, and it missed the trachea by a centimeter. Had it hit either one, I'd be gone. So I grabbed it and got out of the car, and the other car that was in our caravan came up, and we still were hearing shots. So I get out and I yell at them, holding my throat to get down, because everybody else in our car is there in shock and on the ground. And
Was anything coming out when you were yelling?
it was bleeding, but that's how I knew that I had a chance, because had it hit your jugular, it would have been
Done.
done.
Yeah.
So I just got down on my knees and prayed and thought this was it.
While there's a bullet, while you're bleeding,
Yeah.
right? You still get out of the car
Mhm.
to go out to make sure they're okay and to warn them. When
Okay.
you're getting out, was voice coming out of
Yeah, I screamed at him
you screamed so you could do that
at the time. Yeah,
at the
I
time.
mean, as loud as I could.
So, and just to paint this picture, you're in El Salvador,
Yeah.
third world country. You're there to do God's work,
Yeah.
missionary work. You're in this caravan and coming down the mountain, borderline jungle. Was it?
Oh,
It
100%
was
jungle.
in a jungle.
Yeah.
You get ambushed, shot in the throat, and where do you go from there? Like medical attention, and we're gonna put the links up and everything, and we'll plug it at the end. But the stories outlined in this book, Shot.
Yeah. Real innovative title, right?
Yeah, Shot.
Yeah,
Hey.
it's real
Right. So it took several months to come up with that
Yeah,
title.
real hard.
But the story is incredible, and then the photo on the back is essentially around the same
That
time,
was 5 years after.
5 years after.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're in El Salvador with 4 young kids
Yeah.
doing this. You're shot. You're in the jungle. Medical attention.
Yeah.
Where do you go from there? Like, what happens?
I mean, that's when people have different approaches to faith, but it was probably the most real experience of seeing God's hand take over, because you can't control it, and I'm a pretty much a driving person.
Yep.
Where you always want to be in control.
Yeah.
But you're shot in the neck on the side of the road. You can't do anything. So we got back in the car, drove down the hill. They wanted to take me to a hospital that was like an hour and a half away, and I knew I couldn't.
Driving. So yeah.
So I told our driver, get me to a clinic. They got me to a clinic. At the clinic, they weren't prepared for anything like this.
Sure.
So it was both tragic, but almost Monty Python type comedy as well, because they had me stand up to take my X-rays, walk over almost like a
No
prison
way.
mugshot, and to kind of take the picture,
Yeah.
and then just adrenaline, God, all of it. I just kind of took over. I started telling the team, who was completely in shock, who to call, what to do. Called a buddy at the embassy, called my friend that ran the nonprofit, told him to call the church back home to start praying.
Wow.
So people started making phone calls, and then I told him I got to get back to San Salvador because I knew the hospital that I needed to be at that had good doctors. So all that started happening, but it took time.
Sure.
It took about 3 hours. And they were able to locate a helicopter through the contact at the embassy. But when they came out, there was only like 3 in the country.
Right.
So it was an old Huey that we had given to El Salvador during the wars of the 80s and the 90s.
What's the irony of that?
It was
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
So they had to land it, but there was nowhere to land it in the jungle. So the closest place was a high security prison, but they had been having riots. So they had to shut down the prison, coordinate with the warden, and land this Huey to come pick me up. So they get me out, and I'm seeing all these like families because it was Visitors Day, watching me being
Oh my
wheeled
gosh.
to the Huey. And for whatever reason, like I held up peace signs because it's like MASH came into my head.
Right,
So I'm
right.
like, that's what you do. You just.
But meanwhile, in El Salvador, that's
Yeah.
a gang sign, and
It
they're trying
might
to.
have been. It might have just pissed off like half,
Right.
half the gangs. And then, the helicopter takes off, and literally everybody else is seat belted in, buckled in.
Yeah.
They didn't do that to me. So we start taking off sideways. I start rolling out, and I'm literally thinking like I made the shooting. I got to the helicopter. I'm gonna fall into some poor lady's backyard and die, out of the helicopter. But we made it back to San Salvador, to the hospital, diagnostico, and they did all the tests, and the bullet had lodged in the esophagus.
So it was still lodged in when you.
It was still lodged in, and 9 hours later, they went in, and before they took it out, just for good measure, we had an earthquake that shook the entire hospital. Like I think it was like a 6.2 earthquake. But they took out the bullet, and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and the first few days I was actually talking okay.
Like you were pre-shot.
Yeah, like pre-shot.
Okay.
But somewhere between either the tests or the swelling or somehow the voice started to deteriorate.
Okay.
When I got out of the hospital, within like 4 weeks, I would start joking, and they found that a part of my shirt had gone in with a bullet, so they had to go back in and take the shirt out because it was like it navigated into my trachea. So it was, it was obviously a super wild story. But then the ultimate kind of like lasting injury is vocal cords that are both paralyzed, one completely. And I just went in like a month ago to UCSD to check on it again because I did a procedure at USC probably like 5-6 years ago, if not longer, like 8 years ago, just to see if there's anything else they could do to help with the voice. And it confirmed that, it's paralyzed.
It's paralyzed.
Yeah.
So go before being shot. You're alpha male, presentable, charismatic, sales, control the room. Yeah, try. I mean,
yeah.
But
I like to think so.
You like to think so. Your wife thought so, right?
Oh, yeah. At least early on, yeah.
But you go from that, you survive, which is a miracle, right? Faith, whatever it is that brought you out of that. Now, fast forward, you're in sales. We're going to get to the forgiveness part, which is the most epic part of this whole story. You're in sales, business development, commanding a room. How has that affected your ability to do what you do? Does it hurt when you actually speak, right? Just walk us through that, because tomorrow, if I knew my voice wasn't there, right? Like, oh my gosh, how would I be able to communicate?
Right.
Because you get past I survived it.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Like, you get past that. How do you go on, and like, what have you done to adapt? A lot of questions there.
Oh, it's great questions. I mean, day to time for sure, because there's no like, and it's interesting because I haven't been able to find like resources, support groups, those type of things.
Doesn't exist.
It probably does, but not accessible enough where I've been able to find them. I've done, some voice therapy and some other stuff. The first adaptation was I stayed down there. I stayed in El Salvador for another 4 years, and we continued to do work. And so we'd have work teams that would come down. So I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, how am I going to talk to
Right.
these people as we're, leading them to help do the project? So I went and bought, one of those microphones and like voice boxes. And
Okay.
so I tried that, but I felt like I was the tour guide for the jungle tours at,
Right.
at
Right.
Disneyland, and it would like screech and it was weird. And so, you start, over the last, it's been 15 years, you try every piece of technology. You try to act like it's not an issue, but it is. I mean,
Yep.
the voice hurts. It's scratchy if I talk a lot.
It hurts. So
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're talking all day, it's
Yeah, because if you look at it, your vocal cords are, without getting too graphic, they open,
Yep.
when you breathe, and then it's actually the closing that creates the tone and the small, passageway. Those vocal cords is what gives you volume, tone, all of that. Mine don't touch. So they stay open like this, and one kind of flickers a little bit.
Gotcha.
So actually, the surgery we did at USC, and the doctor was fantastic and had worked on, actors and singers and such. They put Gore-Tex into one of them,
Okay.
but they put as much Gore-Tex in as could get it to touch without closing it so much so I can't breathe.
Jeez.
So I'm always walking this line between being active, and I love sports and I love to be, you exercise. But it feels like when I'm running hard, I'm breathing through a straw. So you're that and the talking. So you adapt, but the hardest part is understanding how somebody else perceives you.
Right.
Because when you talk, you can get that immediate feedback.
Yep.
And when you don't have tone, there's not volume, even on the phone, people have a tendency to not want to have the type of conversation that you normally would,
Okay.
unless it's a friend or it's an acquaintance that you're in a context where it's super comfortable.
Yep.
Right. So you learn, to have mostly transactional conversations, to keep them short. But it's tough. I mean, sales is about,
Like dinner meetings and going out.
yeah, sales is about building relationships, and
Right.
usually that's done through a conversation. So I think when I get people to one-on-one, it's easier.
Yes.
I think there is a book that is actually a counselor therapist that recommended to me by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, and that was super helpful probably 2 years ago. I mean, I wish I would have got it earlier, but they kind of like, he recasts how weaknesses are sometimes more strengths, not just to overcome the weaknesses, but the actual weaknesses can be a strength. And one example was, the disproportionate amount of CEOs that are on the spectrum for autism, or just because they don't care as much of what people think, and they just drive, and so they're successful.
They're natural.
They're natural.
Yes.
And so for me, I've tried to take that even more recently to become, a much better listener. So us talkers
Yeah.
sometimes suck at listening, right?
We can all learn from that too.
So we all learn
Yeah,
from it.
yeah.
So I try, like, even at dinner meeting, my plate is usually done first. I've usually eaten all my food before the person I'm with, because if I'm asking questions and listening,
You're having more time.
I'm having more time to
Yeah.
eat. And so even like some of those little tricks just to learn how to be a listener.
Yeah.
And you also realize people don't want to hear you talk nearly as much as you think.
Absolutely.
And so so that's kind of the Gladwell thing.
Yes.
I could probably build more, or try to build more trust with people by asking them deeper questions, learn about them, still struggle with it.
Yep.
But it's an adaptive thing. And then, kind of just capitulating and learning and grieving and going, yeah, that's going to be something I can't do.
Yeah.
And if I got a microphone and I've spoken and preached and done different things on stage, it's actually easier to speak to a couple thousand people with a microphone than it is to be in a restaurant with 10
With 10.
on a Saturday night.
That's great.
And so just learning kind of how to adapt and yeah, I mean, there's people whether it's being paralyzed or whether it's losing a limb or something that get adaptive. And, you learn you don't have a choice.
Yep.
You either overcome and, realize people are going to feel uncomfortable. And so you get compassion for them and put yourself in their shoes. And so you try to make people not feel, uneasy.
Yes.
And so you learn to laugh off the uncomfortable jokes or them making the comment about, the late nights. And as soon as you kind of like take it down a notch. So I'm in the business context, when I'm in a business meeting, I take it off the table right away.
You see, it's kind of like that.
I say, hey guys, I don't have COVID. I wasn't yelling at my kids. I got shot 15 years ago. If you're interested in the story, I can tell you about it later.
Yes.
But I'm here to talk to you about our company and
it's kind of like
what we do.
The fat kid, right?
Yeah.
Hey, let me hit it off quick. We got the jokes out of the way.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people appreciate that.
They do. It kind of like you can watch and it kind of comes down and then it's just a matter of like, listen in a little bit and I'll talk. I won't talk too long, so that'll be good for you. And,
right.
So that's worked.
Absolutely.
And then when you build the one-on-one relationship, it becomes less of an issue because it's just friendship and
it's friendship
and that kind of thing.
And keep it going.
Yeah.
So adapting, forgiveness, right? This random person shot you, your life changed forever. They escaped back into the jungle. A decade later, when did you actually find out who shot you, why they shot you, and you ended up coming face to face with this person? Walk us through that, because that is the craziest part of this journey. And I say story because to us it's a story, but it's your journey to see that and to have it within you to even forgive this human that should have killed you, should have died.
Yeah, so I want to say 2000, it was either 14 or 15. I think it was 14. We wanted to write the book. And so I had come across or met this gal, Christy Crum, and her church. And she's just, fantastic gal. Her and her husband, Paul, just became friends.
Okay.
And she had always wanted to write a novel. She had done teaching and coaching and written a lot of kind of smaller stuff. I was still working full time, and I'm not a writer by trade, but I enjoy writing. So, we kind of talked and said, hey, let's put a little Kickstarter campaign together and see if we can raise enough money for you to take 6 months off, or at least reduce schedule and write the book, and let's see. So we did that, and I've done fundraising, through nonprofits. So we did. The Kickstarter got fully funded, overfunded. Amazing. So we're like, all right, let's do this. And so we started the process of her kind of, meeting with me and interviewing, and through that process, we, said, hey, we got to get you to El Salvador. Let's go see where it happened, meet the people, kind of rewalk the steps. And so in the process of planning that, I got a call from a friend who had been a part of, they weren't there on site, but had been, back in San Salvador when the shooting occurred. And he called me and said, look, Pete, I heard this wild story up in Avelinas, which was the town that it had happened in, that one of the two guys that were involved in the shooting, kind of turned their life around through a local pastor. And, kind of through the process of coming to church and stuff, admitted to being one of the guys that was involved in your shooting.
Come on. And
I'm like, awesome, let me meet the guy. I mean, it was such a instantaneous response.
Not with a vengeance. It was.
Nah, I don't even know why. I'm like, well, the guy turned his life around. Let me meet this guy. And so I didn't realize what a ridiculous request that was. So it took a few months, and then as we were planning the trip, it started feeling heavier, especially when we were down there. And it felt heavier for what it was going to be like for him. Because
really? More so than your own self.
Yeah, because by this point, I mean, part of being down there was serving, people who've gone through, especially in that area of the country during the 80s and 90s, some of the worst part of the war had been down there. So a lot of these families in their history had been through such severe violence. And El Salvador historically, unfortunately, has been known more for its violence and its gangs rather than, amazing country, its beauty, its people, its beaches. Um, and part of the reason we were down there was to try to help change that, right?
Right.
To try to take advantage of how great they are as a people. And so for that story to be written. So I think when this happened, there was some frustration with these guys, but it wasn't personal. He didn't know my name.
Yep.
I mean, the thing that we can come up with was that it was some type of mistaken identity.
Right.
In the process, side note of forgiveness, there's been stuff like we all go through where someone in your life betrays you.
Yep.
That's a hell of a lot harder to forgive
Absolutely.
than getting shot.
Because they're in your circle.
Yeah, you've trusted them and
Yes.
they know you. They know you personally. So, and this, I think the randomness of it, still was tough. But I think that's probably one of the reasons.
That's why.
And just the faith side. I mean, from a standpoint, if you're following the book, there's, Jesus on the cross, you forgave, and
Yeah.
short of that, I mean, anything that happens to you, you kind of feel like, well, if he did that, I can do this.
Then you could do that.
Yeah.
So that was a driving force.
Yeah,
And
100%.
why, like they're in the jungle. Why did he shoot? Was he part of a gang and he just thought,
There was a group, I mean, in most of the gang activity in El Salvador is either in the cities
yeah,
or in like these suburban areas,
Yep.
not like our suburbs, but just around the city centers that are gang violence.
Yep.
Um,
the worst, sorry, on that point, some of the worst, if not the worst gang in the world,
Yeah.
right? The MS-13, I
Yep.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
just gnarly what they do to their people.
100%.
And then you take that away, El Salvador, and growing up in Canada, we had a big Salvadorian community,
Oh, you did?
family, friends, like
Yeah.
just beautiful people
100%.
about their family.
Yeah.
And you'd hear stories about this gang, MS-13,
Yep.
coming to their ranch, stealing their ranch, killing their people. And it's like, it's a shame that they've been, just ransacked like that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a much deeper story to it because from what I understand, the gangs didn't exist before the war. And when the war happened, the best stuff that I've ever read was that it was Salvadorans that lived in SoCal that were being terrorized by gangs in the LA area and formed kind of this gang to protect themselves. And then they started getting deported back into El Salvador. And when they were deported, they kind of went back into these city centers.
Wow.
And then the gangs kind of flourished. And that's,
So it's not homegrown.
It's not homegrown, yeah.
Interesting.
But some of the violence, the machetes, all that,
Yeah.
was learned in El Salvador in the war. And the violence up in the area where it happened to me, there's called Morazan. It's on the border of Honduras. It was more guerrilla warfare.
Okay.
During the war, we think it was a group of just banditos that would terrorize locals, but they were like killing the guy with the bread truck. It was not, I think, as much an organized gang. We had heard that there had been a guy up there doing construction, drove a car like me,
Okay.
and was sleeping with the gals and stealing money. And so, the rumor was that there was a hit out on this guy because they didn't steal anything from us. We had
Right.
video equipment, construction equipment, money. They didn't take anything. They just came out to shoot and kill.
And in the book, the local priest was in the car, or a spiritual leader was in the car.
There was, next to us, a volunteer from the U.S.
Okay. And maybe one of the
And-
shooters recognized them.
No, they thought I was.
They thought,
No, they thought I was the guy that they were trying to kill. And then we had Miracle, our doctor, because the medical clinic was in. That saved my life. And then with the other car was the construction group that we were working with that were building
Yeah.
medical clinic.
Okay. So you go through this, you forgive, you see him.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
So in the book, we heard this. We set it up. So we go back, and my wife had never been there, and And the writer, Christine and Paul, had never been there. So we set it all up with this pastor to go meet the guy. And we pull in, and the pastor's nervous because he's been told kind of in confidence that this guy had been part of the shooting.
Right, right.
So we pull in, and the guy's there, and the pastor kind of makes the introduction, but he introduces me as the guy that was a part of the organization that had done a bunch of these projects. And so we sit down and we're talking, and I see his kids, and they're kind of running around, and his wife, and the the guy we were with finally kind of says, "Well, do you know who this guy is?" And guy looks and he goes, "Yeah, he was the guy that was shot all these years ago."
He recognized you.
Well, no, the guy, kind of the team guy that it took us up there from the organization
Yeah.
that kind of set this up, who I got the call from. He said that to the guy who'd been part of the shooting, and you could see the guy's face just drop, and he just starts kind of shaking.
Wow.
And he started going through this like 10-minute, like alibi. I was not, I wasn't there, and in Spanish, and yet even in doing that, he like had located where the bullets were and the shellings were, which was along this like 20-mile jungle road. You would have not known,
Yep.
Where it was unless he had been there that day. And so he had been, one of the two guys either up on the hill or the guy that pulled the trigger. We don't know.
Wow.
And we looked at him and said, "Look, I don't know what you were a part of, but I just want to let you know, it stunk. I wasn't going to let him off the hook.
Right, right.
This thing."
It's an understatement.
It's an understatement. Yeah.
It stunk.
Yeah,
Like-
it caused some pretty challenging things in my life. But look, I am super happy that you turn your life around to God, and for me to be able to see your family. And
Absolutely.
and I say, "Hey, do you mind if we pray together?" And we prayed together, and I got pictures, which I've never shared because I never will share.
Okay. So we can't put that up on the links right
No,
now.
no. But I'll show you on the phone after.
Okay, that's good.
But it was just this, as a person of faith, seeing something that was so bad, and it really was that bad, and it'll be hard for me for the rest of my life, and
Of course.
affected our family, and all the stuff that goes along with trauma. But to see restoration, and to see how forgiveness opens up, it doesn't guarantee, but it opens up the opportunity for something that's horrible to turn around.
Yes.
If I respond in revenge and aggression, there really isn't space for something good to come out of it.
Right.
I mean, it could, but not really.
Not really. Yeah.
Once-
and it's consuming you, right?
Once me as the victim, forgives, then the monkey's off the back. I didn't pursue legal action.
Right.
I didn't go after him. We were really, kind of discreet how we did it. We told him we didn't want, this to impact their family. And now his kids get to have a dad. His wife gets to have a husband. And I get to enjoy the fact that I was able to kind of, sit on the grenade, so to speak.
Yeah.
And to take it,
If he didn't turn his life around and you still had an opportunity to meet who it was, whatever the scenario would have been, would you still?
I wouldn't have wanted to see
You
him.
wouldn't have wanted.
No, because, I mean, it's, grace and truth go together.
Right.
Right. So, offering forgiveness is one thing, but if the guy on the other end doesn't take it, then, it's still in that dangerous situation. Right.
Yep.
So, I mean, if I would have heard of him, the potential to have legal action because a guy, could do this to somebody else.
Yeah. Yep.
So, it's not kind of wishy-washy, kumbaya.
Right.
No, it's like this guy turned his life around and he's good. If not, he probably needed to go to jail.
Yes.
Yeah,
different.
and I could still forgive him.
Yep.
But there at that point, justice needs to come in and do its thing.
Absolutely.
So, it's not one or the other.
It's not one or the other. Two main things, and again, I know pressed for time. So the book Shot, we're going to talk about just the publishing side of it,
Yeah.
what that looks like. Before we get into that, let's talk about Bitcoin Beach.
Oh, yeah.
If I was in another country, touch wood, went through an ordeal like that, a lot of the times, if you were mugged in Paris, for example, you often associate Paris. I don't want to go back.
Right.
I was mugged there. You got shot, almost killed in this country, and yet you not only go back and visit and forgive and take your family, and you're a big surfer, right? And you go back and you invest in property. You start working with helping local missionaries and developing a business and doing all that stuff there.
Yeah.
Just talk to us about why, and then it could be a whole other segment, but what is Bitcoin Beach
Yeah.
and what are you guys doing? And indirectly part of the world's first country that has accepted Bitcoin. I think it's just a really good story to share with everyone.
Yeah, no, I think back to your question, like forgiveness and space. It also, I don't know, can create the opportunities for innovation and creation and
Yep.
doing stuff that you wouldn't normally see if you don't go through trauma
Yep.
or something to come out of it. The main reason we stayed is I felt this, and I just call it God, but I felt this really heavy need to stay and for the family to heal down there.
Right.
Because I knew everybody wanted to come back to the States, my family, and it was probably the right thing to do. Come back to the States, just heal, move on. But I didn't want our kids to, associate El Salvador with just violence, because they would have. It would have been that dynamic that you explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also didn't feel done. We ended up working for another 3 or 4 years, living down there. And the work that I got to be a part of those 3 or 4 years was some of the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my life. Just the projects we did, the type of people we got to work with,
Right.
from water to housing to you name it. It was amazing.
Bringing change, like real change there. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, you know what it's like. It's one thing to volunteer, and volunteering is wonderful, but to see a community go from not having water and then, later 5,000 of them have water, and you got to be a part of that process. It's invigorating. It's unique.
And having your kids part of that process.
Exactly.
You grew up, kids born, raised here in
San Diego,
California.
yeah.
San Diego, California. Beautiful.
100%.
Anytown, USA. Like just awesome.
Right.
And they're experiencing bringing water to a country where we're taking 30-minute showers here and not even thinking twice about that.
100%.
It's crazy. And your kids, I've never met them, through social, through talking, just seem it's such a strong foundation. It seems like you guys have such a strong unit. 18 to 25 is the range of their age. How much of that and your unit is dependent on just having them exposed to that? Because that, I see that as
I'd say it's almost everything.
everything. Okay.
Just because I think, they realized that the world doesn't revolve around them, and that people, most people in the world struggle just for daily survival.
Right. Right.
And so that's a big one.
Yeah.
Especially coming from SoCal. But then through the process, they've, especially the boys, because they're older, and they were older when we were down there, gone through their own kind of struggles, through the shooting. But they came out strong because they learned. And I don't think, we were talking before the podcast a little bit about this culturally. You go through something like this. It's one thing to survive. It's one thing to kind of make it through and adapt. But to overcome and to use your weakness as strength, I don't know if we teach that as much.
Right.
And our kids have experienced it. And, we didn't engineer our kids, but they all gravitated towards swimming and water polo. All 4 played competitive water polo in SoCal, which is hard to do.
Incredible.
They've all become ocean lifeguards, ocean swimmers, surfers, and they've all just learned that when you get knocked down, you don't cry about it. You get up and you move forward, and someone down the beach has it harder than you do. So I think that was a real big reason why we stayed. And kind of completed what we were there to do. And then at the tail end, I met Mike Peterson. He started coming to our church,
In
and
El Salvador.
in El Salvador.
Okay.
And he had property, vacation property, in El Zonte for years, just as a surfer.
Okay.
Was spending more time down there, wanting to get more involved. Just amazing guy. Him and his wife Brittany and their kids have become like family, just close friends. And as surfer, you always have this wild dream of like finding that piece of property right next to, a perfect windbreak. And we happened to find one. So there's a break on the east side of the country called Punta Mango.
Punta Mango.
Punta
Okay,
Mango,
yeah.
outside of a town called El Cuco. And it was this old, rustic kind of cliff with just trees and rocks and nothing on it, and out in the boondocks. And we were able to buy it, and we bought it in 2009. There was nothing there. And because of the work I had done in other communities, I started getting to know community leaders, and we got to be a part of the water project, and then got connected to power, and we started just kind of building. And then Mike and I were like, what are we going to do with this? And his heart had grown for aid workers and missionaries, and through my story and others, just people who had been down there to help. It was rough. I mean, I don't know many people who got shot, but people who had been down there had tough things with their families, and so he kind of birthed in him this approach to build a kind of a resort or a retreat center for missionaries.
Right on the ocean.
Right on the ocean. Yep. And then he already had a vacation house in El Zonte. So we started building it, and then started sending missionaries out there just through friends that we'd had down there. I kept going back to check on the construction, and it's kind of what kept me going back to the country. And we'd start doing 8 projects in both towns. So, we'd help with a local school or add some piping, give some money, and really start helping in these poor communities that were right on the beach. Because you'd have this, at that time, and still, you'd have this like pristine ocean break, beautiful, and then really poor communities right on the beach.
Right. But if you look at just the property in the ocean,
yeah,
and you were to say this was Laguna Beach, we're talking tens of millions of dollars.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And down there, I'm sure for a
a fraction.
A fraction, yeah.
So we started doing that, and built momentum, and then Mike started to do less of his business up here. And around 13, 14, he started doing more full-time down there, living most of the year down there with his family. He put together a board and organization called MISSIONARY. And an anonymous donor from SoCal, out of the blue, approached the organization and then approached Mike, and had made a ton of money on Bitcoin when it was like 10 cents, if you can imagine it, if not 5 cents, and wanted to do good, but couldn't find a nonprofit that wanted to just exchange the Bitcoin for cash and use it for their org. So Mike, just entrepreneurial, has a financial background, came up with this 3-page proposal. I looked at it, and he sent it, and didn't think much of it. And the guy either tweets back or texts back, or it wasn't even really cryptic. I mean, it didn't even seem real.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it. We'll do it over a 3-year period, and we're going to give you a bunch of Bitcoin. And
we're talking millions of US dollars in today's.
In today's, it kind of got up. Not so much today because it's come back
down.
down.
Today, yeah,
but it was kind of this launch, and so Mike, because I'm still working full time up here, took the lead and really obviously drove it. Put together a team in El Zonte, which is on the west side of the country. Our property's on the east side of the country, closer to Nicaragua, and we did a trip to Uruguay to go to a big conference, and took a couple of the people in each of the towns that are Salvadoran to go with us. And there probably will be a book, a movie, a TV show about Mike.
Right. He was just on 60 Minutes.
He was just on 60 Minutes, yeah. So Mike's become kind of this celebrity.
Yep.
Not kind of, yes, in the Bitcoin space. And he just threw the kitchen sink at injecting Bitcoin into El Zonte to create this circular economy. Long story short, named it Bitcoin Beach.
Bitcoin Beach.
And, this is the guy that, came up with chocolate covered bacon and turkey wrapped legs
Always
at
innovating.
Del Mar Fair, the Orange County Fair.
Okay.
So he just knew how to like
Yep.
throw a name and go for it and market, and did a really good job, building relationships in the Bitcoin space, and then marketing it online, and it grew, and then it was kind of like a tipping point, far faster than we ever thought, where July, I think it was maybe June of last year, the president, BUKELE,
President of El Salvador. Yep.
pushed, and through some connections that Mike had made with some Bitcoin companies that were down there, saw that this could really be something good for the country, got the law passed, that it became legal tender, and first time in the world. And by September, it was, and we went down, I was down there in November with Mike, and we got a chance to go to an event that BUKELE put on, and it was like a rock. I'll show you the video.
Yeah.
It was this big stage. They took over this beach club. They had a couple thousand people there, and he comes out, hat backwards.
Rock star.
Dude, it's like fireworks going, AC/DC's playing.
No way.
And he's like pointing at people, and
the president of El Salvador was there.
And he's speaking to the crowd about Bitcoin, and at the time Bitcoin was at its height.
Yeah.
So there are definitely some bumps and bruises in implementation. But the big desire, and I think what's kept us engaged, and Mike, it's his story, because he's been leading it, is on the east side of the country where I'm still involved. We're doing Bitcoin projects. We just got done with a soccer field, indoor, kind of like turf, really nice soccer field, and we're building classrooms and doing English classes and Bitcoin
all
training,
in Bitcoin.
all in Bitcoin.
So what you and Mike essentially started together, what he was spearheading, led to the president of El Salvador loving this, grasping it, then law being pushed into place where it's official tender in El Salvador, the world's first country to officially accept that. I remember seeing it in the news, people going into McDonald's and buying Big Macs with it, like in El Salvador, where you don't expect it there. You'd expect it in the Cayman Islands or whatever.
Right.
And you guys are part of this. You brand a beach, Bitcoin Beach. Like it's an incredible story.
Yeah.
Where do you go from here? Like, what is the future? Are the locals skeptical because Bitcoin's on the low right now and they're holding this coin?
I think it's all the above.
Okay.
The rollout of the wallet, from what I understand, has had some bumps and bruises.
Sure.
The government came out with a wallet called Chivo. And so, but I mean, it's not even been a year.
Yep.
I think the thrust of it was, I think, twofold. One, the government saw the ability to get investment to come in.
Yep.
And so, we were talking earlier, like a month ago, there was 44 central bankers from around the world that came in and did a conference with the government and came out to Bitcoin Beach with our team and met with different people. And so it's on the world stage to see how this is going to work.
Sure.
One quick pickup is that even remessas, which the majority of the income into El Salvador is through money that gets sent back, U.S., Canada, other places. Well, you can now send it in Bitcoin, and now you're saving 5, 10, 20% that would get charged in the transfer.
The Western Unions,
all of it, 100%.
All of it. Yeah.
And so that's right away. The other thing, and what's interesting, is to see what bigger companies do. You mentioned McDonald's and Starbucks and those sort of things. I got to think, because they've already invested in what it took to onboard and accept it, a lot of that is sunk cost. That now, if Guatemala, Nicaragua, Mexico, I mean, imagine if Mexico does it, right? Then all of a sudden now Bitcoin does that. And if they begin to accept it, then it really does become kind of this global currency that El Salvador, for whatever reason, nobody's going to deny it was the first place where this happened. So it's become, I think, this lab.
Yeah.
And, back to why we went down 20 years ago in the first place, it can open up an opportunity for businesses to come in and hire that mid-grade professional And that's what El Salvador, for me, in my experience, has always been wrestling with.
Right.
You know, you can try to help with the water projects and a lot of these things that, again, they're super important, you know, the basics.
Yes.
You know, the wealthy have their money. But, you know, the people that get out of college, that, you know, my kids are in school, that are wanting a job.
Yeah.
And the job rate from one statistic I heard is like 10%, 20% come out of school. So they go and get their master's, or they go back, or they leave.
Yeah.
And so for there to be a new industry where businesses want to come in, and now you can hire that talent, that reshapes how people see El Salvador, because what they see a lot of times is they're a bunch of poor workers, or they got good beaches, and
or the gang aspect, which is sad, right? Like you're just positioning them as this.
But they've got 5 colleges that pump out these brilliant kids who are talented, hungry, and just don't have a job.
Right.
And so, to me, if Bitcoin creates businesses that do that, now the country could grow in that middle sector.
Absolutely.
Because what then happens? They get married, they have kids, they buy a house, and that starts to really kind of help kind of grow that middle tier that we need. So that's hopefully what we can be a part of.
Right.
You know, I got a day job.
Yeah.
So
right.
You know, this is kind of where the energy goes.
We all need passion projects.
That's passion projects, yeah.
100%.
But, you know, I go 2 or 3 times a year, and every time I go down, just seeing the change over 20 years, I think what's exciting now is there's hope for a different reason.
Yes.
And people down there can say, look, there's an industry that is new and that I might be able to be a part of.
Absolutely.
It might be a reason to stay.
And that's why your story is amazing. And again, you know, in closing this, you go down there, missionary for what you believe in, spread the word. Something happens, changes your life forever. You go back, you find the forgiveness, and now you're positioned with something that's just at the forefront. People are skeptical about or not. This is the currency, and then it happens in the most unassuming place, and you're positioned with that, and you're giving jobs to local people with Mike and this organization. It's absolutely it's inspiring.
Cool.
You know, just to see that.
Nice.
You're awesome. You know, even with the work that you do in the lighting space, which isn't as exciting when you start looking at it.
So sexy, man.
Yeah, so sexy.
That's why you're in it, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's awesome, and I appreciate your time.
Cool.
And any final comments or plugs or anything people should know about Mr. DeSoto?
No, I mean the book, the publishing we did, it's just finished 5 years ago.
It's amazing. It's an amazing read.
I mean, we made the book. I think turned out well. We're happy with the product. We made a decision to not. I mean, we self-published.
Yep.
It's on Amazon, but we didn't want to plug it to try to build, you know, some type of thing out of it. But over the years, we share it, and I think a lot of people that have read it, and there's been a good deal. I mean, it's done decent.
Awesome.
Enjoy it. So yeah, I just go to Amazon, and that'd be the best place to get it.
What, is it only Bitcoin, or can they pay cash, USD?
No, Bitcoin. You know, write you and send them to me.
Okay, that sounds good.
We can do it,
dude. I appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening to this episode of Invigorate Your Business with George Stroumboulis. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons, and follow me on all the main podcast streaming channels. Also, please share your comments when you can. I appreciate your help in expanding this network to a worldwide audience. Until next time, stay invigorated.